Ever since I was young, the idea of boating was the coolest thing for me. I swam, kayaked, and paddleboarded, but none of these stood out like being on our family's motor-powered boat at our cabin. As you can see, I obviously hated being on the water. Hi, I'm Morissette, and today I'll be explaining how I turned my passion for boating and my love for the sea into a year-long Masterworks project. What made me choose a boat restoration for my project? Well, the idea started when I was coming up to my 11th birthday, and I had spent the last couple days preparing for my boating exam. When my brother and I passed the exam, we both got the opportunity to drive our family's 9.9 horsepower tin dinghy that we had at our cabin all by ourselves. Having the independence to operate this boat on my own was amazing. Plus, I could drive the larger power boat that we have at Georgian Bay with the exception of having a licensed adult present, which is my grandpa. Ever since then, I've been excited about all things boating, including the types of boats and how they work. I remember looking at boats on Facebook or Marketplace when I would use my mom's computer. Not because I knew I could afford any of the boats, because I was 11, but it was mainly because I wanted to dive into all the information and gain as much knowledge as possible. It was not until before my birthday that I got the opportunity to experience what it was like to own a boat that was actually mine. My great-aunt Mary had owned a classic Davidson dinghy for a number of years, and when she offered it to me, I was extremely appreciative to obtain something so meaningful. The boat had seen better days since it was old and had been used a fair amount over the years. To others, the damage and work needed may have been overwhelming or demotivating. However, I could not wait to start working on it. As you can see, this project has been a major goal to finish since I was 11. This was, and forever will be, my first boat, and that's what motivated me to do this project. Before getting into the restoration itself, what makes the type of dinghy valuable? And more importantly, who was the creator of this special line of boat? Hamish Davidson is the creator of the Davidson dinghy, who was well known in Vancouver for his boat manufacturing. However, what was not widely known is that Hamish was an innovator in many other fields. Hamish started off his career as a cabinet maker and early on developed an interest in building skis. He built his wooden skis through the late 1920s and into the 1940s, being one of the earliest ski manufacturers in Vancouver. There is also a reference to him building some of the first fiberglass skis around at the time. In the 1940s, Davidson met and worked along with Charles Horston for Boeing in Canada, building the Mosquito bombers. The Mosquito bombers were British combat aircrafts used by the Royal Air Force and other Allied forces during World War II. After his work with Boeing, Davidson started to branch off into different things. One specifically is his line of wooden dinghy boats that he later modified by adding fiberglass to the hull. These were widely known across Vancouver and British Columbia as Davidson dinghies. Davidson went on to create around 3,500 8-foot, 9-foot-6, and 12-foot dinghies. As powerboat yachting became more popular, so did the need for small boat dinghies to serve as tenders for the larger boats. One of the most popular boats he manufactured was his D9, which is the 9-foot-6 variant rowing sailing dinghy. This is the boat that I currently have. Some of the perks of the boat that made it appealing are, to begin with, the hull of the D9 is made specifically for less resistance and minimal transom drag, even when carrying a full load. The smooth finish fiberglass also makes it easy to clean and maintain. Where is Davidson manufacturing now? Well, as time went on and the popularity decreased for the classic fiberglass hulls that they were providing, Hamish Davidson moved on to different things in his life, leaving the business to his son. Eventually, things got tougher on the financial end, and Davidson Manufacturing was no longer operational. For a while, a company on Vancouver Island manufactured Davidsons. However, they had closed about 20 years ago, being the latest company manufacturing the dinghies. Now that we've gone over the history, let's get into the restoration itself. When beginning the project, I had made a list of the specific tasks I wanted to accomplish. This included repairing the keel strip at the very bottom of the boat, redesigning the seats, sanding and adding fresh coats of paint to the interior and exterior, restoring the gunnel and the L-brackets around the edges of the boat, and finally, to restore and replace accessories that may be needed. The first thing I worked on the project was the keel. If anyone's still unsure about what the keel is for my boat, it's the strip that goes along the bottom of the hull. The specific model of mine has two separate parts, Part A and Part B, with this being the point of separation. Now that we understand the basics, I'm going to explain why it's needed restoring in the first place. As you can see here, it's clear that the wood was rotting and had been slowly deteriorating over time. The problem if I were to use this on the ocean would be the fact that water would seep into the exposed wood and further damage the keel. Over time, it would keep breaking down until I would inevitably have to replace it. Upon the first look, I found that the keel is connected to the boat with a few bolts that go from the inside of the boat to the exterior. There were 2-inch screws that went through the longer part of the keel directly into the part that I was going to remove. I started by removing the screws that connected the two pieces of the keel. However, at the time of removal, the bolts that were connected through the boat had started to strip when I tried to unscrew them, making it more difficult to remove. When the day finally came to remove the keel part, my grandpa, my external advisor Chris, and I first attempted to pry the longer part up and remove the bottom part using screwdrivers and a crowbar. However, we encountered a small setback. Due to the tension on the longer part during removal, it broke apart. At the moment, it seemed like a big setback, but in turn it wouldn't be much of a problem since we would be able to glue it back on using epoxy. After the damaged keel piece was removed, we discovered that dirt, rust, and paint had gathered beneath it from over the years. To fix this, I used soapy water to remove the surface level of dirt and a sander to eliminate any blemishes on the surface. In preparation for installing the new keel, it was necessary to first prepare the replacement piece by sanding it down to make it fit with the other piece and to the bottom of the boat. The next step was to apply a mixture of epoxy resin and hardener, which I applied to each point of connection, being the two split parts between the hull and the keel, and also to fill previous holes where the bolt went through. After some time, I was able to sand down the excess epoxy that had dripped and dried. Nearing the final step of the reinstallation process, I next added screws to connect the replacement piece to the boat. The screws added went through the two keel pieces along with the hull of the boat to firmly connect everything. Next, I sanded the pieces together to make them look like one singular piece. To finish this off, I added a coat of paint to complete the first restoration so far in this project. As far as technical skills, I can safely say I learned the most from doing the keel. Whether it be using epoxy, sanding, painting, and more, the process and learning that came along with doing the keel set me up for all the following restorations in this project. Previously, the seats on my boat had been painted a dark brown color. During the summer that I first worked on the boat, my grandpa and I painted over the brown seats with a bright blue. At the time, the idea of a bright color from the seats was exciting to me. However, as time progressed and I continued working on the boat project, my perspective changed. Initially, I planned to paint over the blue with gray, as it seemed too difficult to remove the paint. However, after writing my section on the types of marine wood, I learned more about different types of wood and how they can look when sanded and finished. This sparked my interest in removing the paint from the seats. The first method of removing paint I used was a chemical paint stripper called Citrus Strip. I applied a coat evenly on all visible points in the wood, and after a 12 to 16 hour wait, the paint was ready to be scraped off. The method of paint removal was proven to be very effective, with much of the paint coming off with little to no effort. There was still quite a lot of paint left, so to complete the paint stripping, it would require another coat of the stripper. But the Citrus Strip was almost out. So in the following days, I purchased another product called Easy Strip. Then I repeated the same process as it did earlier and waited overnight. Coat after coat, the paint still remained in sections, and by then the wood had been fairly saturated from the amount of stripping solution, which prevented further work because of the moisture. At this point, my spirits were low about removing the paint because of the large amount that was still left there. I decided to take a small break for a couple of days to reevaluate the situation. As a last attempt, since the paint stripper was not working to its full potential, I decided I would try and take a different approach by sanding it. I first started off with 80 grit sandpaper on the paint, and I was surprised at how much came off. The ease to remove the paint was likely due to the previous layers removed by the paint strippers. This seemingly awesome turn of events would soon become the second most time-consuming and frustrating part of this project. I'll get into what the first was later on. Even though this was a longer process than I expected, the result was worth all the time and the effort. With the seat restoration coming to its end, the final two steps that are vital to 1, sand the wood to finish with different grit sandpaper that is slowly increasing to create a more fine and smooth surface. Then the final step is to apply what's called marine cetal to add a stain to the wood while preserving and protecting it for the following years. And that brings the seat restoration to a close. Getting to the painting portion of my Masterworks was very rewarding for me because however small or large changes made to other components of the project don't compare to the transformation that comes with adding paint. It's also a very important milestone for a project like this because it signifies that you're near the end. When painting the interior of my boat, the most important part of the process was the preparation. And as hard as it was to not immediately paint, which was very difficult, I'm now glad that I did decide to wait because of how it turned out. Because of scratches and epoxy that had previously dripped into the hull, I started sanding with 80 grit sandpaper, moving my way up to 220 grit by the end. Once smoothened by the fine grit sandpaper, I vacuumed the inside to remove all the stray sawdust and used a cloth with some paint thinner to remove the rest of the dust. At this point in time, the only thing I needed to do was cover the areas I didn't want to get painted with masking tape, and then I would be ready to go. Because of the thickness of the paint I was using, I was able to get away with using only one coat of paint to finish the job. With the interior done, my next step was to start the exterior. Much like the inside of my boat, I had to first sand the exterior with the sandpaper grit slowly increasing for it to be ready to add paint. I then used masking tape to cover the gunnel and section off an area from my blue strip to go across. At this point, I was ready to start painting. Fiberglass paint is notorious for creating bubbles on the surface, so I used a method called roll and tip. The idea is you use the roller to roll the paint out evenly on the surface, and once the bubbles start to go to the surface, you use a foam brush to push them all out. For the color, I chose to use an off-white, which required me to do a total of 3 coats to fully complete it. Once done, I removed the strip of masking tape, revealing the stripe across the boat. Then I used masking tape above and below the strip to define the area I wanted to paint. I chose to paint it the same color as I previously used, which was navy blue. Before explaining the steps of the nameplate restoration, it's important to understand why the nameplate is important and what the numbers and words mean. On my nameplate, there are 4 numbers, with the first 2 being the date of manufacture, which is 1945, and the second 2 numbers being the model number, which is 25. The date was important to me because when writing my section on Davidson manufacturing, I could get a reference on whether my boat is one of the more rare Davidsons or not. And the model number is what I believe to be the 25th boat made in the year 1945. Now to get to the restoration. The nameplate located at the stern had some visible damage from sitting over the years, with rust covering the surface to the point of it being difficult to read the writing. Fortunately, this problem was solved with some fairly simple steps. First, I removed the nameplate from the boat and placed it in a bowl of vinegar. Applying vinegar to the rusted nameplate dissolves the oxide, leaving behind water-soluble salt that can be easily removed with the surface of the rusted metal. Once I had done this, a fair amount of rust came off. However, the nameplate still had some imperfections and lacked the shine that a brand new metal would have. To further remove the rust, I used a 180 grit sandpaper attachment on my Dremel, which proved to be very effective. In a short period, the nameplate was as shiny as new and ready to reinstall in the boat. In my Davidson, there are wooden L brackets that are placed against the transom, which is at the very stern of the boat and on the seats connecting them to the hull. These brackets at the stern of the boat are very important for structural integrity because they help stabilize the boat and make it more sturdy and durable. Much like other components on my boat, the L brackets had started to deteriorate and break apart. Because of the bolts connecting them to the hull were stripped, we used a metal cutting tool to cut them out. After some work, they were all taken off successfully and ready to be replaced. My advisor Chris, who helped me remove the L brackets, cut 4 new pieces in the following days. And this brings me to the most time-consuming part of my project, the sanding of the L brackets. The wood used was very dense, which is ideal for boating and being used in marine purposes. And what comes with the wood being very dense is the difficulty of sanding. My job after the wood was cut was to sand the new pieces to the same shape of the previous L brackets, which meant I had to be very delicate while trying to form the specific shape to fit in the boat. The process took around 2 days with lots of time put into the sanding, and after the final few hours, they were ready to be reinstalled. Unfortunately, I was not able to finish this part in time with them not being fully installed yet. But the steps of the reinstallation includes screwing the pieces between the gunnel and the side of the boat to the stern and applying epoxy to fully connect them to the boat. With that said, let's move on to the gunnel. The gunnel had previously been painted the same brown color as the seats. However, over time, most of the paint chipped off. This left me with a half brown, half wood situation, and I decided to fully commit to the natural wood look. Additionally to the paint situation, the pieces between the side of the boat and the long gunnel piece had some splitting points that needed to be fixed with the use of epoxy. I first removed the pieces that were split and set them aside. Then I sanded the entire thing until it was all raw wood. Then I filled all the split parts with a mix of epoxy resin, hardener, and sawdust. Followed with another sand, I was on to the final steps of reinstalling the pieces and staining the wood. I installed the pieces with epoxy resin and hardener and sanded them one final time with a high grit before adding a final finish to enrich the wood, being the final step in this restoration. The journey of my Masterworks has taught me countless things about boating and restoration, as well as myself. The main factor in my learning was my mistakes. Through each one of them, I have learned and improved in many different ways. In the beginning, my knowledge of handling power tools and working with chemicals and paint was bleak. Through mistakes and challenges, I have learned what to do and what not to do through trial and error. With this, I have expanded my knowledge on the fundamentals of doing a restoration project and my own time management. In this project, I have also learned tremendous things about problem solving and perseverance, from things going sideways and having to improvise. An example of this was in December, a couple months after starting the project. At this point in time, I had my boat placed underneath a metal frame tent to keep it out of the rain. When over the span of around 6 days, a few things happened that affected how I work on my project. During the week, there was a heavy snowfall, and snow started to collect on the part of the tent touching the wall of my house. As it melted and further rained, the weight gradually increased, causing the metal to bend. Also in the same week, the temperature rose to the point of having all the snow melting, and it's starting to rain. This addition of weight caused it to bend even more. At this point in time, I noticed what happened, so I did my best to drain the water and try to bend the metal back. It seemed fine until the following day when there were heavy winds and rain causing two things. Firstly, the tent filled up water much like before, and started to bend as well. Secondly, the strong winds added more stress to the tent than before. Finally, the metal was strained so much that it snapped in multiple places. Now, this put me in a place where I had to find a new place to put my boat, and quickly, because I was starting to get behind. I decided I would clear out my shed to be able to place my boat in there to keep it dry. At the time, the boat work had to be postponed temporarily. Our shed in the beginning was full to the brim of anything from chairs to spare wood and shelves. The total process took around 5 days with many hours put into organizing. In total, for the final day, I spent around 7 hours in the shed organizing and clearing it out from my boat and creating a workstation for me at the same time. Once finished, the boat could be placed in there along with a workbench for better indoor working conditions. With the boat being completed to my own criterion, for the most part, and it being ready to take on the water, could there be any more? Well, there are a couple things that I will be hoping to do in the near future. For one, I will have to decide on a name for the boat and apply that when ready. And the second is something exciting that I will have fun doing in the future. I haven't explicitly mentioned this, but I have said that Davidson dinghies are rowing and sailing dinghies, but I'm guessing you haven't seen a sail in my boat in this presentation. And that brings me to what could happen in the future to complete the full Davidson restoration. And that is to bring the sailing rig attached to its former glory. My main goal was to get this boat looking nice and ready to take on the water as a motor or rowboat. However, photos like this made me rethink what my end goal was. To get this boat sailing ready, I would have to restore things like the rudder, daggerboard, boom, and mast, and also clean the sail. With that being said, from doing this restoration, I've gained a lot of knowledge and understanding of each aspect of my Masterworks that can be applied in further projects. All in all, this restoration sets me up for many things to come, whether it be another hands-on project similar to it, a paper that includes extensive research and journaling, or any project that includes the skill that I've gained from this boat restoration. Before I take questions, I would like to thank some notable people who helped me through this project. Thanks to my external advisor, Chris Barnett, for providing support and important information throughout the entire project, and for supplying tools, accessories, and parts that helped make this project successful. To my Grandpa Max for helping me start the project, teaching me countless things about boating, building, and restoration itself that I will keep with me for my entire life, and always offering important, valuable advice. Thank you to my internal advisor, Carrie Marintet, for helping me organize and keeping me on task during the year, and helping me format and polish off my paper. To Jen Hendrickson for answering my questions throughout the year, doing the hardest job of keeping me on task during work blocks, and giving me many opinions on ideas that help make this project functional. Thanks to my great Aunt Mary for making this project possible, inspiring me to push through until the project was completed, and giving me important information and interesting facts on the history of the boat. To my mom for helping discuss helpful ideas for the boat, offering support where it's needed, and always being there to be a helping hand with painting and sanding. And to my Uncle Colin for helping me form ideas for the project at the beginning, always giving me helpful advice, and helping me find supplies and tools for my boat. And finally, thanks to my friends, Adam for helping stand and speed up the grueling process of the paint removal on the seats, and to Cole and Isaac for helping in the beginning with small tasks and sanding. Thank you very much.
Morissette, excellent presentation. I'm so glad that the boat got moved here so that we can see all your hard work, because it sounds like it was a lot of hard work.
Yep.
Lots of learning in this, in many, many different areas, and I'm sure the questions from the floor are going to be really pointed to all the cool skills and things that you learned along the way. So we will start with questions from the advisory team. So Carrie, go ahead.
Excellent job, Mr. Morissette. I hope you feel really proud of yourself. I feel really proud of you. This was no small undertaking, and you spoke a lot about the things that you learned along the way. You talked a lot about the skills you learned along the way, but I'm wondering, what did you learn about yourself? Like maybe about your personality, or like...
I mentioned this very quickly, but I didn't elaborate too much. I'd say time management was an important learning thing for me, because what comes with a project like this, as I said, is things go sideways. And in my mind, if I wrote a plan about the stuff I would do, it didn't include all the stuff that would go sideways and lead to the project being like slightly incompleted in the end because of the lack of planning beforehand. So I learned a lot about like how I should expect for something to go wrong before I do it, because that sets you up for being more prepared when it happens. And then that also just helps me in the future with another project that is like this.
Nice. Just one more question. Would you consider ever restoring something else, say like a bowler that's half restored?
Definitely. And that might happen this summer, so
Nice.
we'll see about that.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Ben. You're doing a great job. I have 3 questions. One is, sometimes the sail has a number on it. Does that correspond with the transom plate?
I believe it does. I haven't looked at it in a very long time, but I think so. I think you'd be right about that, yeah.
My second question is, where do you hope to sail with this or power with this boat?
Mainly on the island. It would be kind of hard to like bring it around anywhere else. But yeah, just on the beaches around here. Last year, because the boat was like ready to take on the water, like there wasn't any huge damage to the hull that made it like obviously sink if we took it on the water. So last year we did put a motor on it and we took it out when it was like the inside wasn't completed or anything. So we went to like Bowen Bay. So we would go around the beaches on the island and stuff. But also in my mind, I'm like kind of wanting to just keep it and like just like look at it all the time instead of like actually taking on the water. So yeah.
Well, there's a famous quote that is, there's nothing finer than messing about with boats.
Yeah.
And my final question is, there's a terrible disease that comes with boating, and that's called one-foot-itis. Have you heard about it?
No.
So one-foot-itis is a disease that takes over small boat owners, that they have a desire to get another boat that's 1 foot bigger. Do you feel that you might aspire to getting something bigger and sailing farther abroad?
I do actually. Eventually, my main goal, like from when I got this boat was, hey, once I'm done this and I learn a bunch from the small dinghy, then I can go onto a larger sailboat. And my potential sort of idea for this was like, once I learn about how to, like, the year I got the boat, I also did sailing courses to like prepare myself. But I was like, once I'm done this project, then I can go into a larger sailboat. And my idea was one that would have like a cuddy cabin for me to stay in as well and do like longer trips and stuff. So that's always been an eventual goal for me to be able to do a restoration that's larger, yeah.
Well, if you're needing any more advisory roles in the larger boats, I have one in my driveway where you can come and help me.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Lots of questions from the floor. So your brother gets Mr. Morissette, semi-junior senior.
Great work, Mr. Morissette. Very impressive project and final product you have here. My question for you is, I know you love the ocean, I know you love boats. Do you see a future in that, possibly extending into university later in life?
Possibly. I mean, I don't know if I would like pursue a job with it necessarily, but like the main idea from this and what inspired me to do it was my grandpa, like, he didn't really work in like restoring boats or anything, but he just knew a lot about it. So I wanted to be that kind of person where in my future I like know a whole bunch about it, so if I wanted to pick up something, I would be able to do it. Not sure if it would be like a career or anything. I mean, it could be. I mean, I'm very interested in it, so it definitely is a possibility, but not sure.
I liked your comment, Mr. Morissette, of just having it maybe so you can look at it in your room.
Yeah.
It's interesting that the other Morissette had a bowler trailer and was going to move into it, so maybe you could use your bedroom with your boat, have it set up there. Be interesting. Go ahead, Mr. Lee. Yep, come on up.
Fantastic presentation, Mr. Morissette. So I'm guessing you're going to want to take it out with some friends. I was just wondering, how many people would you recommend can fit on the boat? Like when it's on the water.
Well, it's kind of a heavy-ish boat for the size it is. And also since right now we don't have flotation in there. So before I am going to take it out, I'm going to definitely add flotation to keep it more safe. So if something did happen and water started to fill in, it wouldn't like sink to the bottom of the ocean and all that works for nothing. Last year we got like I think 3 people on it, but that was like a little bit risky because it started to like, you know, go deeper into the water and the back was like this close, so I didn't really like that. So not a huge amount of people, just maybe like 1 or 2. Yeah.
Mr. Morissette, when restoring boats, does replacing parts of the boat decrease its value at all?
That was one of the things that I had to decide when doing this project, is whether I wanted to make it completely ready to just be on the water and be as like durable as possible, or bring it back to exactly what the Davidson dinghies were like. And like if you're replacing stuff that's like wood, if you're using the same type of wood, that doesn't really matter too much. But if I'm adding modifications and stuff, like one of the things that I'm eventually doing is going to be adding aluminum to the very keel at the bottom, just so if I were to run into rocks or anything, it wouldn't damage it as much as it would because it would have a metal strip below there. So adding something like that would definitely decrease the value a little bit because it's obviously the classic Davidsons didn't have aluminum at the bottom. But for the restorations that I've done so far with this, it wouldn't decrease the value too much because of the amount of stuff that's like just like I don't know, just right now the stuff that I have is very similar to what the classic Davidsons are, but if I were to add modifications, it would change it.
Fantastic presentation, Mr. Morissette, and also a great analysis of your process journal. I have two questions for you. The first question is, how long do you think this boat would last, or how long do you think you're gonna keep this boat for?
I'm planning to keep this boat for a while. I mean, it was like in my family for a while, so I definitely don't want to just immediately get rid of it. I feel like that would be not great. But also I love this boat, so I definitely want to keep it for a while. And as far as how long it would last, it kind of depends on how I maintain it. And if I keep doing repairs, or when something goes wrong, I don't just leave it. And my goal is to always keep doing repairs on this and keep it as like tip-top shape. So I'm sure it could last quite a while. I mean, it's from the 1950s and it's still like in pretty good shape, so definitely could last a lot longer as well.
And my second question, backing off of Isaac's question, is how much do you think this boat costs?
Well, this is actually, I forgot to mention this in the presentation, but it's quite interesting because the Davidsons are quite rare in Vancouver, so there are some that are like completely damaged, like holes in the hull and whatever, like can't actually go in the water yet, and they're being sold for like more than some new dinghies that are like inflatable. And I think one of the ones that was fully restored was selling for like $4,000. So these are quite, compared to other dinghies this size, they're quite valuable. And then like the ones that are also like in pretty bad shape are also still going for a lot of money, and they're not just going for free, which is interesting.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Morissette, are they free? Sorry, free, that's what I meant. Are they rare?
Yeah, no, I haven't seen that many. I mean, obviously, like, or Hamish Davidson and the whole Davidson manufacturing is also like it's well known, but it's also like within a certain community. Like if you search it up, it was quite hard doing research. Like I had to do a lot of digging. But then if you look at places like Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, when you see the boats, there's like a fair amount of them, but then you can tell there's ones that people have restored and then the ones that people have just like left on there. But it's also like probably only one page of stuff, whereas other types of boats, there's like, you can scroll endlessly on different things, so quite rare, yeah.
Mr. Morissette, Senior.
We jumped in. My question to you is about the licensing. I noticed how you got that at such a young age, and I'm curious about what the license does, and can anybody take out different boats without the license?
Yeah, I'm not sure the exact criterion, but I do know that you can get the license pretty young to drive a boat, but that limits you until you're a certain age, which I believe is like from 14 to 16, to driving only boats that are below 9.9 horsepower. And this is for motor-powered boats. You can obviously row a dinghy at any age, it doesn't really matter. But for motorboats, and then once you're like 14 to 16, I'm not exactly sure the age, then you're allowed to drive larger power boats with like an adult present who has a license. And then when you pass 16 or something like that, then you're allowed to drive it on your own, I believe. Yeah.
How old were you when you got your license? 11?
11, yeah.
I have a question. Go ahead.
Great job, Mr. Morissette. You had an amazing presentation. I was just wondering, what was your favorite part of restoring the boat?
My favorite part, even though it was one of the hardest parts, was the seats. Mainly because, like, my main idea from the start was to get them looking like the natural wood. And at a certain point, it was kind of discouraging because I didn't think it would be possible. I haven't really done paint stripping or removing paint from anything before. So when I started and it didn't seem to look like it was working out, I got kind of discouraged. So then in the end, it was the most rewarding because in my mind, at a certain point, I was like, oh, I won't be able to do it. And then when I was able to do it, I was like very happy because it seemed like something that wasn't possible. And it also was my favorite part because in the same sense, sanding can be very frustrating, but it's also very like calming at the same time because you're kind of just there. And when you get into a flow, it's not as bad as it seems.
Go ahead.
Mr. Morissette, you did a fantastic job. It was a lot of fun seeing you go through the whole process of learning. I wanted to ask you a question, and this is to the benefit of your classmates too. You were really clear you wanted a project. You wanted something physical to work on. You didn't want to just have like a paper for Masterworks. Can you explain why that mattered to you, having a project and something you worked on with your hands?
I mean, for me personally, the project, when I got to like do the entire thing, in my mind, doing a paper can be very rewarding in the end. But from like what I've done before, I've done small things. I also did this boat when I was 11, so I think choosing something that I got to like do a process on and actually complete was probably, or like the reason I chose it is because in the end I get to look back and see the boat that I actually have. And I'm not saying if you do something else it's not as rewarding, but actually having the boat that I spent all this time on, like for a good amount of time after the project, was like seemed more appealing to just having like a paper or something.
Great, thanks for answering that for all of you. Thinking about your Masterworks in the future. Fine.
I just have a quick question. The ID plate, do you think it was copper? Because it looked a little green on it?
I think so. I don't know too much about metals and stuff, but
Well, using your chemistry skills,
Yeah.
instead of just vinegar, what could you have maybe tried to restore that instead of needing to sand it? I'm putting you on the spot, remember? I wonder, it would be interesting to try ketchup or salt and vinegar and see if you could get an actual
That's what I was gonna
chemical
say, yeah.
change. But it'd be pretty cool to try ketchup instead of having to sand it.
Yeah.
But anyway, I also, a comment, and I'm just so impressed that you have taken this project on, and it's such a beautiful, beautiful boat. And it also stands for environmentally to save something that's how old? 30, what, 50, 80, 70 years old?
yeah.
That's incredible, hey, to think that you've preserved that so that it can live on and saved it from the landfill. So thank you for that work.
That was really cool. How many hours do you think you worked on it in total?
I could give an estimate. I'm not completely sure because it's like, because I did this project from when I was 11 and then took a very long break and then started to do it again. I don't know. I mean, there's been like same as what Cole said in his presentation, there's like different increments of the time you put in. There was points in time where like for the sanding in total, I probably spent like over 10 hours of sanding, not just the seats, but everything in total. And then if you put that with like painting and like waiting for the paint, I mean, that's obviously not a part of it, but like a couple days worth of work, I'd say, like in total. Yeah.
Very nice presentation, Mr. Morissette. Do you think, like, after preserving a boat and stuff for your Masterworks, do you think that you would probably go to the next step and probably make a boat from scratch?
Maybe. I mean, that is like sort of a different process because restoring is like different little things like sanding, but then like making a boat, depending if it's like wooden or fiberglass, like working with fiberglass is very different to like what I'm doing on this one. So possibly that could be something that I do eventually, but not sure yet. We'll see.
Can I just ask a question? Were you part of the group that built our cedar strip canoe with Easton?
I mean, yeah, I did help with it, but not as much as the older class.
Skills from there with the epoxy or fiber, I guess? Not
really, because I was mainly a part of like the cutting the wood. I was only there for like a couple days, but yeah.
Ellie, come on up. First,
Fantastic job, excellent presentation. I'm just wondering, are there any skills that you've learned from maybe like doing this project that you might take into your next like step, like high school or maybe even like your future career that you think would be helpful?
Well, I said like time management for that mainly, but then also like I guess on that would be like patience as well, because I had to do a lot of waiting to like get accessories and materials to do something where like in my mind I really wanted to just start like sanding and doing all this stuff, but I had to do a lot of preparation as well. So I guess like patience as well is one of the skills that I've learned.
Mr. Morissette, this is a beautiful, beautiful boat. I really, really like how you chose to go with the wood. That aesthetic is something I really appreciate. My question for you is a philosophical question. As you replace pieces of the boat, you're fixing the boat, you're restoring the boat, you have to change things. This boat's 70 years. When you're 70 and you've replaced every piece of the boat, is it still the same boat?
In my mind, yes. I'd say so. I mean, depends how much I'm replacing. If I replace the entire hull, then it's like a completely different boat. But whether it's the small stuff, I think it still becomes the same boat. But it also depends how you replace it and what you replace it with.
So what makes the soul of the boat for you? What's the essence that makes that boat that?
For me, and this may seem kind of like unusual, but the small little like accessories, the metal ones that are kind of unique to the boat, and like the nameplate itself, like if I replaced the nameplate, that wouldn't feel as genuine. Like as you can see, there's like little cracks in the corner, and instead of just replacing the entire metal itself, I wanted to like add it on there even though there's some imperfections, because that's what seems the most genuine to my own boat.
Right. Great answer and great product. Well
Thank
done.
you.
I have go ahead.
Well, just a really important question. What's the name of the boat?
I'm not sure yet. I have to still decide.
It didn't have a name before?
It did have a name.
That's right, yeah.
Kind of a funny story.
There's something about that.
Yeah.
You can change the name of a boat if you don't let it be known what the previous name was. And then there's a whole ritual about changing the name of a boat. You can only do it at full moon. You crack a champagne bottle and, turn 3 times to the left. Stand on your head for 3 minutes. It's exciting to pick a name for a boat.
Do you remember what it was?
It was ISIS, which is kind of controversial, so I didn't want to use that as the name for my boat, so I painted over that right away.
Do you want to do a great interview on your name later on?
Eventually, yeah.
With the champagne?
With the ritual as well, yeah.
Rituals,
Yeah, you can't forget that, yeah.
I'm curious, you mentioned you might want to change it into a sailboat. Do you have sail, mast, boom, the whole
We have all that stuff right now. Only thing is, I believe it's the mast that has like, I believe it's splitting in some parts, so that would require restoration, but with everything else, it would include like sanding, getting some like more pulleys and stuff, but that shouldn't be super hard. I mean, it's only like the mast that really needs the work, so.
And do you know how to sail?
Yes.
Great. Well, then you've got yourself a project.
Yeah.